Okay, sorry about that. I forgot I had something in the oven. So I took the opportunity while I was down there to get some that I've made before. This is one here. I think that it's one of my favorites. It's got some little beads and such in here. Little flowers on the side. And basically I made the faux stone, didn't bake it, put it right away in the bezel. Hi Tonka. And baked it all together. I also made this one here. And it has just some little forget-me-nots and daisies and such on it. I thought it turned out quite well. And this is, I think, is my favorite one. I don't know if you can see that. They have little bicones here, little clear ones, and little beads as well. And that one was actually really simple. I'll show you something similar to that. So I'm a fly by the seat of my pants kind of person. And so I don't know exactly what we're going to end up with. I've got a couple things I put together today that I need some bezels so that I can show you. I've got a couple little faux stones. I've got a swirled pendant and a couple little things I was using up some canes. Normally what I do is use something, I use the same cutter to help make the bezel so I know it's going to fit. So this is this cutter. This one here I don't actually have a cutter for. Well, this one I do. That one was just kind of, I made the swirly bead and pressed it flat, so we'll have to kind of work with that. To do these today, I have preconditioned some clay, and I have just some random colors. I use a lot of silver, just because I find it very classy. And these are the colors that made up some of the pendants. I also have a selection of beads, like so. Try not to finish spilling them all over the place like I just did. To use in case I need those, just as embellishments. And some little bicones in pinks and white. That one's kind of a plummy magenta color. I have some larger plastic beads. I probably try not to use those because every so often I use the wrong kind and they melt while I'm baking them. I also have some little cutters. With this one here in particular, I used the little round cutter to make these pieces for the petal. So I guess we will get started. So I'm going to start with one that I know that I have the shape for. I'm going to start with this one here. And it's just like a little marbleized cabochon in oval. And so what I'm going to do is, I know that I used this cutter to make it. And so instead of using the cutter side of it, I'm going to turn it over. And I'm going to use the thicker side that we normally hang on to. And I'm going to just push that down. Now I've conditioned the clay on my pasta machine, and it's about I think it was a 6 on mine, so just kind of in the middle range. And I'm not going to push it all the way through. I'm just going to push it in so that I have the outline that I need. Now if you're lucky and you have some consecutively sized ones, you can do this and just cut around it if you want it that large. So I could do that, but what I did last time, because I didn't want it quite that big, I just wanted to have a base for something to stick to it, is I actually freehand cut just around the oval that I've got pressed in there. And it doesn't have to be perfect because it's all going to be covered up. It just needs to have something to stick the shapes to. So there, that's good enough for me. Just going to smooth that out a little bit. Okay, so I'm not going to put that in quite yet. I'm going to do a little bit of work on it first. And I'm going to use my circle cutter and make sure it's clean. Make a few little circles. And I can't remember how many it took. 1, 2, maybe 4. I think it took me 4 last time. So that's what I'll start with. And what I did at this point is I just cut each one in half. Like so. use my cold. So, what I want to do is I want to have one on each end, top and bottom. I've got my little sculpting tool, and I just kind of push my shape up against it just to give it a bit of a rounded edge. And then I'm lining it up with the cutter mark that I made and sticking it down, and that's pretty much all there is to that part. As you can see, I just need to make a little bit of an indent so that it's not quite straight across. Otherwise it looks more octagonal when you get done with it than rounded, and I want to fit the stone inside there still, so I want to have that oval space in the center. And you have to do that more with the top and bottom because obviously it's a tighter curve than you do on the edge ones. After that, I'm just going to touch it to the one ahead of it and press it down. Fairly straightforward. And one of these days I'm going to try this. I might do it tonight. Try it with this one here. I think it'd be kind of cool having little points sticking out as opposed to the curves. We shall see. So I start at the top and bottom and touch them up against the top and bottom one. I don't know, sometimes it spaces out perfectly and sometimes it doesn't, but if you do it this way, then the top and bottom match, and whatever you do with the sides looks like it was meant to be done that way. It doesn't have to all match. And yeah, it's not going to. So what I think I'm going to do is, because my circles aren't quite going to fill the space, I could do two different things. I could put the circle there and then fill the hole, or I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to see whether or not my oval cutter will fill the hole. So I'm going to cut two ovals instead of the circles, and I'm going to cut those in half. Where'd it go? I'm going to cut those in half. Round that edge a little bit and tuck that in there. And that fits just about perfectly, so I will show you how this looks. Didn't need two, I don't know why I did two. Wasn't really thinking that part through. So sometimes you get the one where the cutter has where the seam on the cutter is, and you get this little nick. I try to avoid those if I can help it, so I'm going to put that one aside and do a side that doesn't have the nick in it. Okay, so to show you what we have so far, there we go. Let's see that. So basically it's just a petal shape. It's very straightforward. And what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to get rid of the little bits that you can see in between. No, actually I'm going to leave those for a bit. It's because I'm going to put some stones in there. But what I am going to do is I'm going to use this tool again, and I'm just going to push down in the center of each of these just to kind of stick them together, and also to give it a bit more of a petal shape. I'll show you in just a second how that comes out. There, as you can see, gives a little 3D kind of an effect because it's dipping down in the center of each petal. It also kind of sticks it down a little bit. And then I'm going to do with my stylus, I'm going to start in the center of each one. Make little indents. Now you can stop there if you like, With this one, I don't know if you can see it very well, I did 3 indents on each. I think I'm going to stop with one this time. I like the look of it. And this is where I put in my stone. Now if I've kept this fairly outside my circle, it should almost drop right in there. Yep, it does. There we go. I try not to put too many fingerprints in it, but my hands are dry, so I tend to leave marks. So that's how that's going to look. So now it's just a case of doing embellishments, which is the fun part. I like my little bicones, they're quite pretty. I like to have a crystally part to it, so I think I will use those again. And I need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of them. 5. I have the worst habit of spilling beads all over, so I'm going to pop that lid back on before I make a mess. And what I'm doing is I'm setting the bicone on top of the seam between the little pieces I cut out. And you have to fiddle around with it a little bit because you want to make sure that the points where the holes are pointing across. So that basically one hole is hidden by the centerpiece and the other hole is on the outside edge, because you don't really want it, well you could, I suppose, have it so the hole was pointing up. You'd have a little circle in the center of each. But I like the diamondy shape of it. So I'm going to do that. And you get it where you want it and you just push it down. Just so that it gets stuck into the clay. You just kind of fiddle around with it a little bit. They're small and I don't have a lot of patience, but I like to try and get them at least in the right direction. Sometimes it takes me a couple minutes of farting around with it to get it that way. Oops, because I dropped them. Like that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Ended up with an extra somehow. Okay, so that like that. See that? So what I'm going to do at this point with this one is I'm going to add some extra color to it. Now I have some light purpley beads that are nice. I don't think they'll stand out as much, so I think I'm going to go with a dark plummy kind of a bead, like so. And these can be a little hard to get right where you want them. Sometimes you get lucky and they'll fit on the end of your stylus, and sometimes you don't. If you can get them to sit on the end of your stylus, great. If not, you end up dropping them where you want them and playing around with them until you get them. Now I just pushing this actually into the actual centerpiece, and I think in the end it gives it kind of a look like when you have a ring and it's got the claws around the stone itself. I could push this back far enough when I put the bicone in, I suppose, to have the bead sitting in the bezel instead of in the actual center. But I just like the look of it. The beauty about making your own bezels is you can do it whichever way suits your style. So this is what we're doing here. We're adding those like that. Oh, that one fell right into place. Love it when that happens. Doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. And 2 more, and we are all set. Not even one of them will fit on my stylus. That's just a pain. Sometimes I get lucky and they'll pop right on there. Today apparently is not a lucky day. There we go. Now, where did that go? Just because I've been touching it with my fingers, I'm just going to put this piece of plastic on it and give it a little bit of a rub. See if I can get rid of some of my fingerprints and smooth it out again a little bit without adding a new wrinkle to it. That was silly. There we go. So this is what we have so far. You can see that. I think that looks pretty good. Now obviously you need to be able to hang it, so you can do a couple different things. You can poke a hole in the top, which works. You can add a loop to the top. In this particular case, I'm just going to add a wire, and I'm just going to stick my wire that I've pre-made into a loop, and I'm just going to stick it right down in, like so. And at this point, what I have that I don't want is, I don't know if you can tell, in behind each of these, sometimes you can see a little bit of the bottom piece. And I'm just going to get rid of that by tucking it underneath with my little tool. And I'm just going to push it in so that it's level with the petals. I don't know if anybody would really look close enough to notice that it's there, but it kind of interferes with the outline that I'm aiming for. And I don't like it. So, push it in, and I'm just going to smooth it a little bit. And there is our finished bezel, which I think looks pretty good for a couple steps and a little bit of clay. And it's certainly a lot less expensive than going into Michael's and trying to find some sort of bezel that fits your style of your piece. I did buy one that was quite nice. I was quite pleased with it, but I wouldn't want to have to do all of my necklaces on the same bezel, and it's the only one I could find. So, here we have it. As you can see on the back, it's fairly plain, but it works. That was fairly easy. So there's one down. Trying to think which one to do next. I have this here. I'm just learning how to do this whole swirling in the center thing, which I thought that was really cool. So I've swirled it with the marble, and basically I made some canes, and the marble is just all the scraps from the canes mixed together and marbled. And then I stuck the marbled piece, and I swirled it, pushed it down flat, and put some pieces of cane on it. I think it came out really nice. Now this one, because it was a bead that I flattened, I don't have a cutter that's quite the same size. As you can see, my cutter's a little bit bigger, and I could put the cutter on it and make it small, but I'm going to cut off a lot of my flower cane if I do that. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this nice dark plummy purple color, because that's what was used in the cane, and I think it's going to bring it out quite nicely. So I'm going to drop that on top of there and just push it down enough that it sticks. I'm not going to push it down enough to distort it. And again, I'm going to just trace around it, and I'm giving myself a couple millimeters of frame of bezel around my pendant, so I have something to stick stuff to. There we go. As you can see, it's not perfect, But as you saw with the other one, we're sticking things to it, so it may not even be showing when we're done. We don't know. Depends on what we're going to do. And I think, I'm going to figure out what I want to do with it. I think the center is fairly fancy, so I'm going to keep the outside, I think, rather plain. I like the whole circles and petals idea. So I'm going to try to make some petals in a different way this time, but still with my little circle cutter. So again, I cut some circles out of my background piece, and I might need that for something else, so I'm just going to set that aside. And I'm going to cut each of my circles in half again. But this time I think I'm going to stand my petals up. So I have all these little half pieces for petals. And I think what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to put them upright around it, like so. And I'm just starting at one end and hoping that it works out nice and even. It may not, we'll see. Now this part's a little thicker than the other side, so I'm just going to trim it to the same basic thickness as my petals are, so it all comes out kind of even. Hopefully this works out. I think it's going to work perfect. I love it when that happens. Okay, so right now they're just kind of sitting in there, but it did actually work perfectly so that it goes all the way around. Oops, wiggle that in there a bit more. You can see from the side maybe, little petal shapes. So what I need to do now is I need to join the two, and I'm basically just going to rub the edge of the bezel up against each petal. And I'm not going to worry about making it perfect because I think I'm going to fold each petal out and down. So you're probably not going to see much of this, but I want it to be sealed. So I'm basically just smoothing out, like you normally would when you have a seam, each of the petals against that piece of hand-cut background. That one doesn't want to smooth as well as the others did. I don't know why. There. When in doubt, try something else. So, once we have this all nicely sealed, and I think this is the last one I have to do. Okay, so this is the edge and the top, and what I'm going to do, I think, is get rid of that pieces on there, and I'm just going to, with my fingertip, push each petal out. Oops, that one wasn't quite as sealed all the way. All right. So, here we go. Just squeezing the edges a little bit to flatten them so they have a nice kind of thinned edge. Now, what we have is a flower petal look. Now, I think once again I'm going to use my stylus. That one's not cooperating. Probably because I can't see what I'm doing. There we go. Now, until they're baked, they're a little delicate, so I'm just going to put my finger behind them. And I'm just putting 3 little grooves in each petal, which I'll show you in a minute. Kind of like veins, I guess, in the flower. Last one. Okay. There we go. You can see the little grooves in each one. I quite like that. I think that's very sharp. So again, I need something to hang it with. And I'm just taking a little metal loop that I made. And I'm just going to decide what I like for the top. I'm going to take it off of here and decide if I want the flowers on the side. I kind of like the flowers on the bottom. I think I do. So I'm just going to push this right down in, like so. So, there we go. That will be bezel number 2. Also, quick and easy. Basically cutting out a shape and decorating it with other shapes, and away we go. So, this one is a faux stone. And I think because of the white stripes are very dominant, I think I'm going to pop it onto a white stripe, or a white background. So I have some white here. I think that's going to be very sharp. I'm not quite sure what I want to do with it, but in the meantime, we'll pop it on here and we'll cut it out. I think it needs a bit more color because the stone itself is very subtle. The thing that stands out the most, I guess, would be the white stripes. That's why I'm putting it on the white background. But I think it needs some sort of embellishment to make it pop out nicely. And I don't think either one of these colors, a little too pink, a little too mauvish, dusty pinkish, I don't think either one of those colors will work. But this one might. So, I think with this one, I might do some curlicues or something along that lines. So I'm just going to work my dark purple. I quite like this color. It's really nice and rich. Oh, I hate this cold. I can't breathe. And there's nothing less appealing than having someone sit there, sniffle and snort like I have been. I apologize. And I've had this cold or whatever it is for months now, and I can't seem to get rid of it. It's driving me crazy. For some reason, that part is just not working out for me. Little air bubble in there. So I don't want it to be a really, really thick curlicue. So I'm going to take it down to a fairly thin little worm. And I think the first thing I'm going to do is make a loop for the top because I want the loop to be behind everything else. So I'm going to cut a little piece and I'm going to flatten it a little just with my fingertip. And I'm going to, I just want to take a look at it and see which I want to be the top. I'm trying to figure out whether I like having that on the bottom or having it on the top. And I think because it's kind of a focal point, I'm going to put the white stripe at the top. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put my little loop, I'm just pushing it down onto there, folding it over, and sticking it to itself. And now I've got a little handmade bail. Okay, oops, like so. It stands out quite a lot right now because it's so dark and the rest is not. But I'm going to be adding some curlicues, so I think that it'll blend in quite nicely in a minute. So what I want to do with this part is I want to make sure that my curlicues are the same size. So I'm just going to fold it in half, like so, and cut. And I just want to give it an extra roll on the ends. Just like to have a little bit of a point when I do my curlicues. Oops. And so I'm going to just roll it in my finger. Okay, so I've got this. And I'm going to set that down. I'm not rolling it all the way because I want to roll it the opposite direction. I'm going to do the same on the other side, and I'm just stopping halfway so that I make sure my loops are the same size. So basically, if my loop's the same size, these are going to be the same length. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my loop at the top and stick it onto my bail. That's going to basically blend in with the bail so it doesn't stand out quite so much. There we go. And discreetly push that down a little bit so it doesn't change the shape. And now I'm going to roll the opposite direction with the other end. And I'm just going to keep rolling it in against itself until I hit the stone. And I'm actually going to put it right up on the stone. Like so. And same with the other side. I'm going to roll it against itself and up onto the stone. And I started with the same length, so it should end up at the same point. And I'm just tapping it down a little to make sure it sticks. So this is what we've got at the moment. You can see a little bit of the white through, but I'm okay with that. I think that looks nice so far. Now I think what I want to do, if I can get this part to roll out that didn't want to work for me before, is I want to make a little loop at the other end, just so it balances out where the bail is. I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of make a little loop, like so, and I'm going to cut it and stick it on there. I'm just pushing it into the white base, trying not to disturb the shape of it. And now I've got these two pieces that are the same length, so I'm going to take advantage of that to make little curls out of them. And again, I'm just going to roll the edges a little so they're not really thick. It's easier, I find, to roll a spiral if you've got a little point to start with. I'm just going to roll it up. And do I want it to go that way? I want it to go this way. I think I might want it to go a little tiny curl on the end. So here's the shape I end up with, if you can see that. And I'm going to put the fat curl inwards towards the stone. And same on the other side. Nice fat curl with a little tiny curl in the opposite direction. And again, big curl is inwards and pretty much on top of the edge of that loop. And then I'm pushing the small curl just up against the stone, not putting it on top of the stone this time, like so. Ugh, stupid cold. Now, this part, I think I'm going to make one. That part has air in the middle, I can feel it. If it feels like your tube is collapsing while you're trying to roll it, then there's a big air bubble. And I'll just set that aside and deal with it later. So I think I want to make one loop like I did on this one. It goes from here to here. And then I'm going to fill it with something in the center. That's my plan. So in order to do that, I need it to be longer than that gap by a bit, probably double the length of that gap, because I'm going to curl each end. So I'm just making a nice long tube, or worm, if you want to call it that. I need two of them, obviously, the same length, so I can do one on each side. So there's the length of the gap. There's double that length, approximately. And two of those, like so. Just double check when you're done fixing your ends to make sure they're still the same length. Approximately anyways. And again, curl the end. Just a nice shaped curl. Can make it bigger if we have to in a minute. And this is where we have to check and see if it's the right length. Because you want it to pop out at the sides, but you don't want it to pop way, way out. Okay, obviously way, way out. So I think I need that to be about there. So I'm going to cut this, and I'm going to make sure they're the same on both sides. So I'm going to do a curl about the same length. Measure it up against the one that I have. Cut. Such a nice curl too. Shame it didn't work. And again, point my end a little bit. Try that a second time. Make a little curl. There we go. Now I'm just pushing this, it's kind of going down around the edge because I'm sticking it to the edge of this piece. So I'll just see if I can show you this. So it's actually sticking down, it's not going straight level, it's going down and around that white piece. I just want to have something to brace it so that it stays where I want it to. And it doesn't kind of melt over when I bake it. So I'm going to try and get the other side the same by sticking that there like that. Just make sure you have the same kind of amount of curl. On both sides. Stick the ends down first so they don't go anywhere. And then tap basically inwards with your finger to stick that curve to the white piece beneath it. So this is what we have so far. Maybe that so you can see it. There we go. All right. So now I need to figure out what to put in here. I don't think I want any more purple. I think it's very dark, so it's very dominant. So I don't want to use any more of that. I don't think my pink is quite the right color for it. So that leaves me with a bunch of purple beads sitting over here and some little white beads. White makes sense to me because there's white in here. So do I want my bicones in there? I'm thinking I might use the bicones as little flower petals. Just excuse me for a minute, I have to blow my nose so I don't make any more disgusting noises.